Hello, this is Anthony from One Cut Studio. This series seeks to compare the rule set and changes between the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons and the newer 2024 edition. As a DM, my party and I have been using 5th edition for a long time, and we're trying to decide whether or not to make the jump to the 2024 rule set. If you, like me, want to know what changes have been made and if you should make the switch, then this series is for you. We're going to explore main classes, subclasses, and core rules. I'll try to provide one-to-one comparisons whenever possible, but as a disclaimer, I will also share my own opinion as to the design and content. Today we're looking at the Druid class. So core class features from 5e are now called core traits, and for the Druid, the core traits have pretty much stayed the same. A couple things have changed. I'm just filling in something really quickly that I left off my document when I first started this. It's just the herbalism kit. So hit die has stayed the same. That's still a D8. Saving throw proficiency is still intelligence and wisdom. Skill proficiency hasn't changed between the two editions. Weapon proficiency has changed. So in 5e, they gave you a laundry list of things that you could choose from. In 2024 edition, they simplify it. They say, hey, you're proficient in simple weapons. That makes it a lot easier to start your character. Armor proficiency has changed a little bit. For 5e, a druid could have light armor, medium armor, and shields as long as they're not made out of metal. The 2024 edition says you can have light armor and shields. So they got rid of medium armor, but they didn't get rid of it completely because there is a feature later on in the druid class that will allow you to choose medium armor, but it's not like you get it outright. So what I think they're trying to do is shape, how you track what track or what type of druid you're going to end up playing, whether it's one that's focused on melee combat versus one that's focused on spell casting. So I think it's just a way of tracking or separating your druid into different play styles. Tool proficiencies, that stayed the same. You still get an herbalism kit. And starting equipment has changed. So in 5e, you could have chosen either a wooden shield or a simple weapon, a scimitar or a simple weapon, and then you got leather armor, an explorer's pack, and a druidic focus. For the 2024 edition, they give you a choice. You have either A or B. A is the full package that includes the leather armor, the shield, the sickle, the focus, which in this case is a quarterstaff, an explorer's pack, an herbalism kit, and 9 gold pieces. Or, if you don't want all those things, you want to go shop for yourself, then you get 50 gold pieces. I don't know why the druid is getting a lot less gold pieces than some of the other classes. Some of the other classes starting gold way more than that if they're going to buy out their kit. But I guess druids are a little bit more poor, so go figure. Moving on to the druid features, the number of cantrips that is the same in 2024 as it was in 5e. So is the number of spell slots per level. That stayed the same. Proficiency bonus has stayed the same between the two editions. When we look at the druid features, you'll see that on the left we have the 5e features, and on the right we have the 2024 features. Features that are highlighted in yellow are ones that the mechanic has changed. Features highlighted in green are ones that are new or added in. And the features highlighted in red are ones that they've gotten rid of, or the mechanic has changed, or they've got rid of them at that level. So, for example, it says in level 4 for 5e that Wild Shape Improvement gets rid of. They got rid of it for level 4 in 2024 edition. That's only because the Wild Shape mechanic itself has changed, and that is back at level 2. So if we compare level to level, at level 1, for 5e, you got Druidic and Spellcasting. In 2024, you still get Spellcasting and Druidic, but again, those features have changed. And then you have an added feature called Primal Order. At 2nd level, you get your Wild Shape, but the mechanic has changed. You no longer get your Druid Circle, which is your Druid subclass. At 2nd level, now it's moved to the 3rd level. I think they're trying to make when characters get their subclass more consistent across the levels. They did the same thing with the Cleric. Instead of the Cleric getting their subclass at 1, they now get them at 3. So I think this is going to be a consistent pattern across the design of the 2024 edition, is that characters classes are going to get their subclasses at level 3. There's also at level 2 the Wild Companion. That's something new. And then moving on, at level 4 in both editions, you get an ability score improvement. At level 5 and 5e, you got nothing, whereas there is something new called Wild Resurgence in 2024. For level 6, subclass feature stays the same. It's just named differently in 5e. It's called Druidic Circle. 2024, they're calling everything for what it is. It's a subclass feature. At level 8, you get your ability score improvement. And you'll see that Wild Shape improvement from 5e is highlighted red. Remember, Wild Shape has been changed. Level 9, you get nothing for each. Level 10 stays the same. 11 stays the same. 12 stays the same. Level 13 stays the same. Level 14 stays the same. Level 15 and 5e, you got nothing, but you get improved Elemental Fury, which is something new in the 2024 edition. At level 16, you still get your ability score improvement in both editions. Level 17, nothing has changed. At level 18, for 5th edition, there's Timeless Body and Beast spells. Well, in the 2024 edition, you no longer get Timeless Body at level 18. It's been removed. You still get Beast spells, but the Timeless Body does come back. So it's not completely gone. It actually is a feature later on of Archdruid, which is level 20 for 2024. At level 19, this is a new design that I've been seeing consistent across the 2024 edition. They're getting rid of the ability score improvement at level 19 and instead replacing it with an epic boon. And then at level 20 for 5th edition, you get Archdruid. And at level 20, also in 2024 edition, you get Archdruid. This one has a nerf alert, and it is the Wild Shape. Wild Shape has been nerfed in this instance. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now we're going to go to these features in depth, a little bit more in detail, and talk about how they have changed. So one thing that's changed that I've noticed a pattern across all the spell casting from 5e to 2024 is that they've gotten rid of ritual casting. I can't seem to find it in the new edition of the Player's Handbook in 2024, which makes sense to me. You either cast a spell or you don't. There's no... This ritual casting wasn't even something that people used often. It was clunky mechanic when it was being used. So this streamlined the process of spell casting. Another thing that's changed is you can swap a cantrip out with another on the Druid list whenever you gain a level. So that way there's more flexibility in casting cantrips and not picking cantrips that and those sticking with you for the entire game as you level up. You might have a useless cantrip or a cantrip you don't use. This gives you the opportunity to be flexible and change that. So I do like that as a change. And then the way you prepare spells has changed too. So in 5th edition for Druid, you prepared your spell list after the end of a long rest, and you could prepare a number of spells equal to your Wisdom modifier plus your Druid level, and you must prepare spells that you have spell slots for. And when you did so, you also had to meditate at least 1 minute per spell level on each spell on your prepared list. So I talked a little bit about how clunky that is when I did the Cleric video, but it slows gameplay down, and it also makes the preparation process a little bit more confusing and time-consuming. So with the 2024 edition, you have a set number of spells that you can prepare that scales based on level. It's no longer tied into your Wisdom ability, so you don't have to do math to figure out how many you can prepare. It's listed out for you. And you can change your prepared spells again after a long rest, just like you normally would. The other benefit now is that you don't have to pray or meditate. Now, I would say that as a flavor rule, you should have your Druid do some sort of communion with nature in order to get their spells, but you don't have to calculate a minute per spell level and really slow and bog the game down. But I still think from a flavor standpoint, your druid should still be meditating or praying or doing some sort of nature communion in order to get their spells for the day. Spellcasting ability is still wisdom. There's no formula for your spell save DC or spell attack in the player in the cleric. In the class description, but I think that they provide that formula later on in the spellcasting. And then spellcasting focus, that hasn't changed. You can still use a druidic focus as a spellcasting focus. So let's move on to the feature Druidic. So in 5e, you learn Druidic, and others can spot messages written in Druidic with a DC 15 Wisdom Perception check, but they still can't decipher what that message says without using magic. This has changed in 2024. So in 2024, you still learn Druidic, but they added a feature where you always have Speak with Animals prepared, and they changed the ability from wisdom to intelligence to perceive a message written in Druidic. Not sure why they did that. I know sometimes wisdom and intelligence, especially perception and investigation checks, can get a little confused. But does it necessarily ruin the game or break the game? No. So it's not a change that bothers me too much. Moving on to the feature called Primal Order. That's something new that's been added in 2024. And this is where I said it gives you those options to further define your druid's role. So what type of druid you want to play. So this is a feature where it gives your druid an extra proficiency. So either magician, you choose one. Either magician, what gives you an extra cantrip from the druid spell list, which you get to use your wisdom modifier as a bonus, and you can also use your wisdom modifier as a bonus to your intelligence on arcana or nature checks. Okay? Or you can choose being a warden, and this is where you get back that medium armor and medium armor proficiency. And now what's additional is martial weapon proficiency. So instead of giving all druids medium armor, if you are a druid who takes warden, you get medium armor. And before, no druids could, use the martial weapons unless it was one that was specified, on that 5e list. But now, if you're a warden, you can use martial weapons. So that lets you choose a druid, whether you want to be a more magic-y druid or more tanky druid, if you ask me, in my opinion. Here's a new feature from 2024 at level 2 called Wild Companion. It's a middling type of ability. I'm not too bothered by it. I don't think it's game-breaking. But as an action, you can spend a spell slot or a use of Wild Shape to cast the Find Familiar spell without material components. And then this thing that's summoned is a Fae. It takes the appearance of a small animal and disappears when you finish a long rest. Okay, that's fine. That's not a big deal. Now we get to what is a big deal, which is the feature Wild Shape. This is what makes a druid, and why people want to play druid is to turn into animals and do crazy stuff as animals. Now, they changed some things, but I think those changes are actually for the better with a few caveats. So in 5e, let's look at what 5e rules were. It says 5e, you use an action to magically assume the shape of a beast that you have seen before. And you can use this feature twice, and you gain expended uses after a short or long rest. And then again, your level determines the beast you can transform into. So at second level, you can transform into max CR 1/4. The limitations being there's no flying or swimming. So a druid at level 2 can't transform into a goldfish, which I find kind of silly. Luckily, the 2024 edition takes care of that. At 4th level, maxed CR half, no flying speed. At 8th, max CR 1, and you can finally have a flying speed. How long does your Wild Shape last in 5th edition? Well, a number of hours equal to your druid level rounded down. That hasn't changed. You can revert as a bonus action. That hasn't changed. you can revert at 0 hit points when you are unconscious or you die. That changes a little bit in the 2024 edition. While you are in beast shape, you keep your wisdom, intelligence, and charisma scores. That didn't change. But your other stats are the beasts, and you take on the beast's hit die and HP. Excess damage is transferred over to you. You can't cast spells in beast shape. Special senses don't carry over to your form. Equipment can be worn by your new form if the DM allows, if it has the appropriate size. But again, the equipment doesn't change size or shape. So most often it's either going to merge with your new form or fall to the ground. And merged equipment has no effect. So if you have something that you're attuned to, it's not going to have an effect really. Or an equipment that has a special ability, it doesn't have an effect. I could be wrong on that, but the way the rule as written versus the rule as intended makes it seem like even if you're wearing magical equipment, it's not going to work in your beast form. So let's move on to the 2024 edition. Now, here's a change. Instead of an action, you use a bonus action. And to me, that's a lot better because it's just something you should be able to do quickly. If you're in the 5th edition, you use a whole action. There, your turn is done. And you have to wait until your next turn in order to do something as your animal shape. So it makes a lot more sense to use your bonus action to assume the shape. Now, in 5th edition, it could be any beast. You can transform into any beast that you have seen. In the 2024 edition, it's a set number, and you have to have them learned. So I do have a little bit of problem with this. I'm okay with having a set number of forms, but I'm not okay with the wording, especially you can change the form that you've learned between long rests. So to me, you just unlearn a form. It's like, but you already knew it. So to me, I guess it's a semantic issue, just in the wording. But I do like that there is a limit, but there is a way to change it around so you're not stuck with those known forms. So I understand why they did it. Again, your level that determines the beast that you can transform into, the CR is the same at the same levels. You'll notice that you can't have a flying speed just like the same, but one thing that there is no limitation on now is swimming speed. So you can be a level 2 druid now and turn into a goldfish or a creature that swims. So that's really good. Another thing too that has changed is you get a number of wild shapes per level. So in 5th edition, it was you got 2. And once you burned them, you'd have to do that short rest again to get them back. And you got 2 from level 2 all the way up to level 19 until you hit level 20, where it was unlimited, and that was broken. So in the 2024 edition, the number of wild shapes you can do starts out at 2, and then it goes up incrementally up until 4 at level 17. So you get more uses of your wild shape, even though they're a little bit limited into how many wild shapes that you can have and do. It is nerfed in a little bit of a sense, but also I think it balances a little bit more. So let's talk about the other 2024 changes about how being in wild shape actually works. The duration of hours is still the same. It's your druid level rounded down. Still a bonus action to revert, but also you can revert when you're incapacitated, so which is similar to unconscious. When you die, which is the same, or if you change your wild shape again, you revert to your natural form. You can change one of your known forms after a long rest, and instead of having to figure out, what this new creature's hit points is, like in 5th edition, when you changed into a wild shape, you had to get those stats and that creature's hit points from your DM, and you would have that creature's hit points until you got brought down to 0 and you lost that shape. Well, in this version, in 2024, you use your own hit points. So your hit points are the ones that you use for your wild shape. You don't have to calculate anything else. You do get temporary hit points. So you get a little bit of a bonus on top, which is equal to, where is it? I believe it's equal to your Druid level. So yeah, so you get some temporary hit points, but you use your hit points. That prevents a level 20 Druid from just being a sack of hit points. With unlimited. So in 5th edition, a level 20 Druid had unlimited wild shapes. So they would get a sack of hit points, get brought down to 0, lose that wild shape, and then go into a wild shape again. And then it was just a never-ending sack of hit points. And sometimes the X success would carry over, and you could slowly whittle away at this Druid. But for the most part, they were a never-ending supply of replenishing hit points because they could keep on wild shaping. This time in 2024, though, you don't have that sack of hit points to rely on. You are your sack of hit points. So the temporary hit points, you get a little bit of a bonus to, but when you take damage as the Druid, it's coming out of your own hit point pool, not another creature's. But what that also means is that you get to stay in your wild shape longer. So let's say you're a toad, you wild shape into a toad, and a toad probably has 2 hit points. You take one attack and you're no longer in your wild shape, and you lose that. Whereas in 2024, you turn into a toad and you have all the hit points that you have as a Druid. So that lets you stay in that form longer to do the things that you want to do in that form and to accomplish in that form. So I do like that change. Again, your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, that you keep, but you adopt the constitution and the dexterity and the strength of the creature that you turn into. You also retain your skill proficiencies, your saving throw proficiencies, and any other proficiencies that you have. So before, in 5th edition, let's say you had dark vision and you transformed into a creature that didn't have dark vision, you didn't have dark vision anymore. In the 2024 edition, you have dark vision, you transform into a creature that doesn't have dark vision, you still keep your dark vision. You don't lose it. Another of the big changes is that your creature type stays your original creature type. So if you transform into a beast, you are no longer, you're not considered a beast. You're still considered a humanoid. So that's important for spells that target specific creatures. All right? So you can't turn into a rat and stop being a human. You're still a human, if that makes any sense. Again, you can't cast spells in beast shape, and your ability to handle objects is determined by your new form. So that gives the DM some discretion in whether or not you can handle things or do things. So can a raccoon flick a switch? Probably. Can an eel flick a switch? No. All right. Also, something that else has stayed the same, again, is the equipment. If it can't be worn by your new form, it either drops or merges. And again, equipment doesn't change size or shape. So there's a lot to the mechanics of wild shape. A lot has changed, but I do think that it is for the better. Let's move on. So the Druid subclasses at 5e, you got them on level 2. But at level 3, that's when you get them for the 2024 edition. The 5th edition had Circle of the Land, Circle of the Moon. In 2024, they added 2 more subclasses, but we'll go into in a later video. These subclasses come from existing supplemental material from 5th edition, and they just reworked them to put into the 2024 edition. All right, let's move on to the feature called Wild Resurgence. This is a level 5 feature of the 2024 edition. It stipulates that on your turn once, if you have no uses of Wild Shape left, you can give yourself one by expending a spell slot requiring no action, or you can expend one use of Wild Shape, again no action, to give yourself a level 1 spell slot. And you can't do so again until you've finished a long rest. So this feature allows for some more flexibility in play. It lets you choose whether you want to use your Wild Shape, or if you need a spell slot to get a spell slot back. And it also prevents players from burning through their short rest to recover Wild Shape because they cap the spell slot recovery to 1 per long rest. So I think that's well designed, well balanced, and it allows for flexibility. I have no problem with Wild Resurgence. Now, in 2024 at level 20, they add a little bit more to this. It's kind of like an upgrade to it, as it were, as part of the Archdruid. So we'll talk about that in a little bit going on. A new feature in the 2024 edition is level 7. You get something called Elemental Fury, and at level 15, Improved Elemental Fury. So again, it's another way for you to flavor your Druid about, what kind of Druid you want them to be. Do you want them to be a backline spellcasting Druid, or do you want them to be a frontline Druid that can tank kind of thing? So at level 7, Potent Spellcasting, you can choose one of these two options. Potent Spellcasting lets you add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any Druid cantrip, or you could choose Primal Strike, which allows you to do once per turn when you hit an attack roll with a weapon, or in beast form. You can cause the target to take an additional D8 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder, your choice when you hit. At level 15, this gets improved. So if you chose Potent Spellcasting at level 7, your cantrip of 10 feet or greater with a range would now be increased by 300 feet. That's really potent spellcasting, if you ask me. That makes for a Druid that could be an effective spell sniper, especially paired with a spell sniping type feat. Or Primal Strike, if you chose that at 7th level. At 15th level, Primal Strike increases that damage that you do by 2d8. So I can just imagine a Druid transforming into a bear and, doing extra damage with their strikes. Really, literally being a tank. All right, moving on. So the featured Timeless Body from 5e at level 18 is removed at level 18 in the 2024 edition, but its mechanic hasn't been removed completely. That mechanic actually gets added back in as part of the changes to Archdruid at level 20. So it's gone at this level, but not removed completely. Now moving on to the feature called the Beast Spells that you both get at level 18 in 5th edition and in 2024. And in 5th edition, while using Wild Shape, you can cast spells in any shape you assume. You can perform the somatic and verbal components, but not provide material components. I like that. It's clean. It's simple. 2024, in my opinion, if you ask me, it kind of muddles it a little bit. They should have just kept it the way they did in 5e. So in 2024, it says while using Wild Shape, you can cast spells in beast form, so that doesn't change, except for any spell that has a material component with a cost specified or that consumes its material component. So a little clunky, but what does that mean? That means when you Wild Shape, you can cast spells that have verbal and somatic, and it doesn't completely outlaw material component spells. It just says spells that have a cost specified or consume their material component. So that potentially means that your Druid could cast a spell that has a material component that's not consumed. So what kind of spells would that be? Well, one spell that you might be able to cast that doesn't have something that's consumed is Wall of Fire. So it's a level 4 spell, and the material component is a piece of charcoal. That charcoal is not consumed. But this is where it gets muddy. Remember, while you're in Wild Shape, your form dictates what kind of objects you can use or manipulate. So as the DM, I have to make a ruling whether or not you can pull out that piece of charcoal. Because let's be honest, all your stuff merged with your body. So unless, that charcoal was on a string around your neck, that was able to remain on you while you wild shaped, you don't have access to it. So I have a problem with this because it's going to set up some altercations between the DM and their players on what's allowable and what's not. They really should just said no material spells and left it at that, made it easier. This version in 2024 definitely muddles the water. So now we move on to the feature Epic Boon. Again, this is a design that I've seen with the other classes so far, is they're getting rid of the ability score improvement at level 19 and swapping that out with an Epic Boon. Now we move on to another big feature change is the Arch Druid. This should technically be highlighted in yellow. But the Arch Druid changes from 5e to 2024 in a pretty big way. So in 5th edition, at 20th level, you can use your wild shape an unlimited number of times. Cut and dry, very simple, but also very, very broken, which is why they nerfed it. Now, they added some extra abilities in 2024, but it's still a nerf. So, Evergreen Wild Shape, this is new. Whenever you roll initiative and you have no uses of Wild Shape left, you get at least one use of it. Well, that's nice. It's not unlimited because, you can't change outside of combat, but you at least have one whenever you need it when you roll initiative. Okay? So, not bad. Nature Magician, this again allows you some more flexibility. And this goes back to that 7th level ability, or 5th level ability, Wild Resurgence, where you had some flexibility in exchanging spell slots for wild shapes and wild shapes for spell slots. So for this one, you can convert a wild shape. Of course, I spelled that wrong. It should be wild shape. You can convert a use of wild shape into a spell slot. And when you do that, you choose a number of unexpended uses of wild shape and turn them into spell slots. One use contributes to 2 spell levels. So imagine you are a 20th level druid. You still have your 4 wild shapes left. But what you can do is you can spend all 4 of those and turn them into 8 levels of spells. And again, to make this not completely broken, you can't do this again until after a long rest. So that's pretty good. And then again, here we go with longevity. This was what the level 18 ability was, which was Timeless Body, now called longevity, and now added on as a feature of your Archdruid. So for every 10 years that pass, your body ages only 1 year. 5th edition druids were hard to kill. Definitely more so than other characters because they had a recycling supply of hit points, an unending recycling supply of hit points, and they lived longer. Literally, 10 times as long as someone else, a creature of their type. So the druid here definitely gets a nerf, definitely gets rebalanced. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So for me, the good things I like, the bad things I don't like, the ugly are so and so. So the good things, I like how they got rid of the unlimited wild shape at level 20. Yes, it was all powerful, but it was too powerful, and I think the druids needed to be brought down a peg. So more balance. Increasing the amount of times a druid can wild shape and scaling that with level made it simpler. I do like that. It gives you the opportunity to do more wild shaping earlier on. And then the fact that you can, exchange a spell slot for Wild Shape allows you some more flexibility in your play. I do like the streamlined spell preparation. Again, it's not tied to how wise you are. This is it. This is set, and you can swap out things that aren't working for you. And then removing the prayer component, at least the time component, is a big deal. That's really good. And then another thing that I liked is that your Wild Shape can have a swimming speed earlier on, so there's no limits, at least to that. Bad things that I didn't like about the new changes is the casting of spells with material components. Like I said, that's going to lead to some arguments, I can tell already, whether or not your Druid is able to use a material component in that form that they're currently in. They should have just axed it, kept it no material components. And then the ugly, like I said, you're limited to what you can know. These are your known forms, but you can change them out. I just don't like the wording and the fact that you just wake up from rest one day and you forget what you know. That's what bothers me. So that's it for the Druid. If you liked this video or found it useful in some way, please give it a like, leave a comment, or share. Subscribe to this channel for more videos. And as always, thanks for watching.